you're either aware or unaware.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful way to, it's very simple. See, like, I was saying before, I was quoting Da Vinci, the simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. One of the things I say in the book is like, you're not paying attention. We're not paying attention to our attention.
Cortney, welcome.
Thank you.
I want to start with the reading.
Okay.
Let's see if it, I know we're a little primed already, but let's see if this puts us even more in the mood. It's from Eckhart Tolle. We depend on nature, not only for our physical survival, we also need nature to show us the way home, the way out of the prison of our own minds. We get lost in doing, thinking, remembering, anticipating, lost in a maze of complexity and a world of problems. We have forgotten what rocks, plants, animals still know. We have forgotten how to be still, to be ourselves, to be where life is, here and now. When I was doing some research, I don't know if I think I read this, that you have this deep knowledge, but also a deep sense of humility, in the sense that your level of like eye engagement is almost intimidating in a good way. It's something to aspire to. And you truly pause and listen. And I think a lot of people, me personally, I'm guilty of it, is like we have like a loaded response sometimes ready to go. And it takes effort to stop that. And as of recently, I'm trying to move away from initially asking people what they do and think more about like who they are as a person. And it's a struggle. We've been like ingrained from such a young age of like, what do you want to be? What do you want to do when you grow up? And that being said, I think it's a good conversation starter. You hold and wear many hats. Motivational speaker, consultant, like strategic consultant, author, sister, mom, daughter. Like, is there a role that you align with the most at the moment?
As much as possible, I try to stay out of overly identifying with roles. I think that actually oftentimes gets us into some trouble. And I talk about this a little bit in the book, but I think it's also really important to take a moment to think about how we actually identify ourselves, right? Like a second ago, you were saying how, from a very young age, we're asked, what do you do? What do you want to do? What do you want to be? And actually those are conflated, right? Because when they ask us, what do you want to be? It's about what you want to do. And when we're really aligned with force energy, the doing happens through us. Okay. It happens as a result of who we are and who we've become, who we are, who we're becoming, who we've decided we're becoming. And that's the true becoming that actually no one or most people typically don't ask you. And that's such just again, that moment of reflection of, I define this person as this, that, or the other, right? And why? And what is even the person? In fact, the word person comes from persona. It comes from ancient Greek theater. It was the masks that they wore. So what mask are you wearing? And it's okay. We all have to wear masks to operate within this dimension, within this thing that we're calling a society, or in various different ways. But it's when you realize that you're not the mask. And this harkens back a little bit to the conversation we were having on our way over here, which is, you're not the body. You're not even this thing that you think is your mind. Like, you're actually not either one of those things. And when you start to become aware of that more and more, that's when, again, the doing will happen spontaneously through you, because doing what you decide to do with your life should actually spring forth from that sort of intrinsic motivation that we all have. And I could go on and on about this, because like I have issues with a lot of the ways we...
And we can swap masks. Is there a way to put on or cultivate a mask that is more congruent and in alignment with our authentic self?
Such a good question. I believe that the mask actually should serve as the kind of like the external representation of the formless. So like the formless, it needs a form to express through. And when I say formless, I'm talking about that force source energy that beats your heart, that sends electrical impulses from your brain down to your legs saying, you know, and your feet saying, let's take one step and another. I'm talking about that force source energy, right? That sort of is the impetus for all of the physical, right? So if you're using the person that you've created, the character, okay, you're putting it in service to that, then the sky is the limit for your potential. I can give you specific examples of what I mean about this if you want. So I used to think that the person was kind of like the end all, like the character that I had created was what was creating the results. And what I didn't realize at that time was their character was actually in the way of the results. Okay. So like the character that I had created, which was a formidable, now I'm, sounding, but it was like, a corporate executive running all around, like all the things that we identify in our society lots of times with so-called success. Like I had all the gold stars. And what I didn't realize was like, well, first I did realize from the signals that I was getting from myself and around that, like, this wasn't it, this wasn't it. So I really had to take a step back. But now that I realized, oh, these characters that I created, they're great. Like people are always saying, get rid of the ego. You shouldn't. I'm like, dude, I love my ego. Like my ego is what allows me to sit here and have this conversation with you. Okay. It's what brings me into a Fortune 500.
Yeah, we're not trying to shame the ego.
No, I love the ego. I'm like, please. But it's when the ego, it's when you believe that you are that. The ego is the self. It's the self, okay? But it's the physical representation of the self, right? So when you start to believe that that's it and that's all you are, that's where people get in trouble. And that's where people oftentimes feel crappy, and they often project real, like, kind of, it looks like a power thing, and they don't feel good. You'll notice, like, if you don't feel good in your relations with your others and with yourself. And that's kind of one of the main ways you can say, oh, wow, I'm just so overly identified with the character. Like, that's what I believe that I am. Instead, when you put the character in service to that force source energy, like, I'm doing this more and more now, and it's astounding the results that you get, because you're no longer identified with that. You're using all of that accumulation of this physical experience that you've had up until now to serve this other energy that I'm talking about. And like I said, when you do that, it's just, for me, it's been so astonishing to see the ways that has impacted my life, my business, everything else.
That's amazing. To provide some context for the listeners, we met at Jameson and Jordan's wedding, and
congratulations.
Love you guys.
We love you.
The impetus that made me curious about sitting down with you is superficially your ability to cultivate a living in Italy and abroad. And I'm also it leads me to be curious about what led you to not feel no longer aligned with that persona. Could you take us back to kind of your journey through corporate world and the lessons you learned through that, and some of the feelings that came up that led you to what you do now?
Well, I often say that I had so many cold shower moments. There were just so many times where I felt like this just doesn't feel good.
Okay. And
so there wasn't exactly one thing, even though in my book and my TEDx talk, I talk about the one thing, but at that time as well, it was sort of what, again, I was not fully aligned, like I was talking about a moment ago. So, in corporate, so when I started, gosh, I've had so many lifetimes in this lifetime that I'm kind of like, where do I start this story? Because I literally started at like an entry level position, but then I eventually, not too long.
I guess growing up, when you started thinking about what you wanted to do for a living, what were some of the initial seeds?
Oh my God, I wanted to be a singer and an actress, 100%. I still do. Anyone watching, I just, like, whoever you are, I need you to know I want to be a singer, songwriter, actress, like guitar player. I like all of that. So, but I did know that I loved, what I loved about all of that, and that I love about my work so much, is I can see and feel the light going on in others. I can feel it. So I can feel when that spark is illuminated and you're just like, oh my God. And you remember who you are. You remember your power. You remember your potential. And that's the greatest gift. Like when I stand up on a stage or one-on-one or whatever, it doesn't matter if it's one or thousands, I can feel that energy. And it's this force source energy coursing through me and coursing through everyone else. And again, when you're aware of that and you bring your conscious awareness and attention to it, we're just these magnificent beings. And yeah, I love seeing it being realized.
On the ride here, you use the metaphor I haven't heard before of tuning a radio. And what we have and what we're looking for has always been there, and we're just on the wrong channel. And so it's one thing to realize that you're on the wrong channel. What did you do to tune yourself to a more accurate channel?
So many things, but if I had to give one thing, it's just listening. You just gotta listen. We're not listening.
A lot of people can't sit still.
They can't. And they also can't go around without external noise, all this kind of stuff. And it was Pascal who said that all men's problems stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And that is one of the most profound statements in the world. And if you actually sit with it, it will change your life, because we're so bombarded. And I was talking about this in an interview, I think a TV interview the other day of, like 20 years ago, I remember reading the statistic that the average American was exposed to something like 3,000 advertisements a day. 20 years ago, Victor. So just imagine today, right, with these phones and everything, just this onslaught of information, and all of it is basically telling you like, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not fast enough, you're not moving well, good enough, your business isn't this, isn't that. Do these 5 things and everything will be solved. And my work is actually the antithesis of that. It's like this deep listening that I'm talking about, and there are various different ways that I propose to be able to do it. But that deep listening, or to just come to it, because it's a coming to it, it's like a returning home. That deep listening will never misguide you, and it will give you step after step, and it will precisely lead you, like if you allow it. But all the noise gets in the way, and that's one of the things that I think the more mindful of that you become, and the ways in which you limit it. And I'm not saying that you need to just, again, sit in a room quietly all alone or in a cave or whatever, because that's not also what we're here to do. But that sort of deep listening, which for me also, and this is just an extension of it, but a very important one, is the embodiment piece of listening also through your body, what your body's trying to tell you. And that's a whole nother conversation, which we can have if you'd like. Yeah.
In your latest book, Give Yourself Permission, I really loved the concentric circle example. Distractions as the outermost concentric circle, and then delusion in the middle one. And then design of dimension, or dimension of design, is the most inner circle. And so some of those examples are maybe the endless scrolling as a distraction. Delusions can be things that keep you busy but aren't necessarily important. And I've seen this in like a grid as well, right? And then the most inner circle is, I guess, your most aligned vision of what you're trying to attain. Any thoughts on people that are highly distracted or deluded but actually don't complain?
Yeah. Well, okay, I've never gotten that question.
You see so much potential in people, but how could you want something more than they want it for themselves?
Oh, and it's not your job to want
exactly, right?
More than they want. Like and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people who think they're helping fall prey to. Like, I've got to save somebody, or I have to save the planet. I'm like, no, actually, it's oh God, there's that great quote, and I can't remember where it comes from, but it's something like, everyone wants to save the world. Everyone thinks of saving the world. No one thinks of saving themselves. And I don't know what great thinker, but it's something along those lines. And I think I might even be botching it up a bit. But the idea is, think about yourself. So when I was back in corporate, I was head of corporate communications, but I also, this is a long story how I got into this, but I got into sustainability, and I ended up leading it for a number of the brands in our biggest portfolio. And then I ended up being the chairwoman of these organizations across the world, and we were doing all this work. Yeah. Tell me.
Superficially, sustainability sounds good. Did it feel good at the time?
Well, so I was, having all of these conferences and events and all these meetings, and we were talking about, really making a change and ecologically and socially. And I just kept feeling like no one's saying the emperor's not wearing any clothes. And like, I remember, I was doing all this in corporate, and I was considered like this main spokesperson for a lot of the things we were doing. And we were developing some really sophisticated technologies as well around products and the life cycle of products and all that. And it was great. I mean, it was really thoughtful work, but I just felt like it's a little bit of a adaptation of Einstein's you can't solve the problem at the same level of thinking that created the problem. But it was like, you can't solve the problem if you're focused on the problem either. So when I looked at corporations and everything, like the great work that they were doing and the subpar work in these areas, but I was like, we keep focusing on this problem, right? Like waste, emissions and everything else. But what's causing that? And it was the consciousness that's causing it. And so for me, so at the time, and then I went and I joined another group. I was vice president of
consciousness of the company.
Well, I'll explain exactly what I mean in a second. So I joined this other group. We were working with clients like Nike and Starbucks and the U.S. military and NASA, like pretty big outfit. I was their vice president, and I was like, we're working on these 100-page documents on sustainability strategies and stuff. And even though that was not my, that was not necessarily, it became my area of expertise, but I was always telling people like, I am figuring this out too. And, but we were working on this stuff, and I just, again, felt like looking at these problems and focusing on them and trying to kind of, remedy the situation as much as we can is not going to save things. But what would potentially save things is if we, as leaders, as business leaders, and as leaders at home and wherever else, if we were sustaining ourselves, if we felt that our life was truly beautiful, and so I coined my own definition of sustainability as the ability to sustain yourself, because I felt like if enough of the individual cells of this organism that we may call a body, a world, a galaxy, whatever that is, if they're in a state of health and well-being, well, then the organism will be as well. So it was about the individual cell. How does the individual cell heal? And as many of us as possible to hit critical mass so that the body can become healthier and then eventually, hopefully, very healthy and vibrant. Does that make sense?
It does. That's a very micro perspective. In the macro perspective, were you looking at each individual human being within the company as a cell?
Absolutely. And in the world, right? Yeah. So, and again, I mean, we don't have to get all metaphysical on this. I think we did enough of that before. But but this idea that, again, that if you start to realize that you're connected to me, that you, Victor, are actually, you conceive of yourself for the most part probably as like, you live here, you're about to get married, all these great things. But when you start to open your awareness and your consciousness to the fact that actually you and I are connected, and we are made of the same stuff as this table, right? And the only reason we even perceive this as solid is because of the frequency of it, the vibrations of it, okay? But if you start to move deeper and deeper into the realization that actually you are all of it, and I don't mean that in a
literal.
I don't mean that in was it megalomaniac kind of way. I mean it in the sense that you're connected to everything. Like John Muir said, pull on a single string and you'll find it attached to the entire world.
I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah. Anyway, again, I might be kind of botching him up a little bit, but I don't think so. I hope not. And that was the general gist. So there you go. Yeah.
So did you try to implement new protocols to refocus people's consciousness within the company?
I did, but this thinking actually came about much later when I started my own company. So I started my first company, and it was an advising company, and I started advising to corporations. And
did you feel like you couldn't do it from the inside, or like what?
No, I felt I did a lot of that work on the inside, but the overall pressure was on these kinds of things that were so established already that I couldn't do the work on the level that I wanted to. Yeah. Plus, my interest has always been in human potential. I mean, ever since I was a little girl, I was picking up books like that versus books on, of course, I like all the other stuff too, because I'm a big fan of just any kind of literature. Not any kind, but lots of them. And I remember just reading these, I was just so fascinated, like, who are we? What are we? I mean, from a very young age, I was really fascinated with what this is, what we're doing, who we are. So, yeah.
So then when did you decide to leave corporate?
Gosh, I have such a bizarre relationship with time that I can't give you a precise year. I think, okay, I know that I published my first book in 2017. So I had left corporate probably, I want to say, a year or two before that. I had set out on my own. I had started my first company. And I think it was around that time, but it was very much a transitional process because I gave them a lot of time. And after I left corporate, I actually joined Sustainability Partners as their vice president. So I left Vanity Fair Corporation, and then I had a whole, I want to say like a year in this other position, and still feeling like this isn't it either. But they're all breadcrumbs, and I can see very clearly how all of them led to what I do today. And yeah, but that was quite a few years back.
This role that we're occupying right now, I don't think anyone can fathom what that could be growing up when we start thinking about what we'd like to do. If you were to give advice to someone starting to think about what they want to do, is it more so like try to think about what you want to feel, like similar to a conversation we had earlier on the way here, rather than the actual role? Because it's hard to imagine everything that comes with that role. That role is so superficial. What would you tell someone starting out?
Gosh, do what you love. Like really do what you love. And you might be surprised of what it opens up for you. Because, for example, I always loved reading and I loved entertaining. And I loved reading. I should say that's not accurate. I loved learning. And the ways I get to learn just constantly all the time in my work are just, I mean, for me, it's like I will grab a journal on neuroscience before I'll grab, before I don't even have a TV. So, but if I were to watch something like on Netflix or whatever, I'm more likely to grab
makes sense. You
something.
Didn't know what The Office was.
I didn't. I know what it is. I just haven't seen a full episode. I think they're brilliant. I love that dude. Anyway,
Wilson,
Steve
Steve Carell. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that dude. He's hilarious. But I just don't. Yeah, I'm not so mainstream in that sense.
No, all good.
But yeah. So where were we? What was this an answer to? Because now I got on The Office and I'm like, oh no, right. So anyway, it was kind of like the decision to really focus on this aspect of business, which is an aspect of life. It's just, yeah. So.
And was it a good transition? Like, I feel like you left on good terms?
Yeah, I left on very, very good terms. I think I gave them something like 6 months at maybe even more because I was covering so many positions. And yes, that's where we were. I was like trying to save that on the last answer, but we were talking about doing what you love. And I actually want to come back to that because so many people will say, well, you can't make any money at that. Right. And so they're focusing on money. And I talk a lot about wealth principles in my book because I really would love if more and more people became aware of what money really is and also what wealth means. Yeah. Because it's not just like accumulating all these things, but we're so driven in our society and we're hyper conditioned to sort of also link our value to some of that. And so, or to a lot of that. And I think it's really important for people to take a step back and actually have the courage and the audacity to follow what's really true for them. And this force source energy that I was talking about at the beginning keeps showing up when you show up for yourself in those ways. And I do recognize how scary that can be because many times in my life I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. And it was just really saying like, but this is in my heart, what I'm doing right now, what I like, even some of the things that are very difficult, like writing these books or those kinds of things. It was like, but I have to do this. It was that inner motivation, that impetus. So, yeah.
You also would like make vision boards out of cardboard too.
Yeah. So we started talking about this a little bit before. I had this is really funny. This actually was the first year that I totally ditched like traditional planning stuff, and I took a piece of dilapidated cardboard. I think I actually cut it out of a box, and I just put all these lines through it. So I had 12 boxes, and I put these just very audacious goals, what felt like very audacious goals at the time. I wanted to publish my first book. I wanted to give a TEDx talk. I wanted to take a whole month off in America, which I hadn't done in I don't even think I'd ever done it since I'd been living abroad. And I've been living abroad for a long time, over half my life actually. And so I took this and I did this, and I thought, how am I going to do any of this? And I had no idea, but I just sort of relaxed into it. And actually all those things came to fruition in pretty astounding ways as well, because I didn't have any of them lined up. I didn't know how it was going to work. And and now actually I don't even do that.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. I think it is important to have some type of vision, but also important to be open-minded enough to understand that possibilities could be endless, and you might not arrive at the initial vision, but the emotions that vision would have evoked is still within wherever you have arrived, wherever you've ended up, essentially. I keep not wanting to use the word arrival because of our previous discussion. It's like,
and it's like
there is no arrival.
Yeah. Good.
Speaking of wealth accumulation, there are people on my staff who teach with me that say, like, I would do this for free. And I try to show them that there's nothing wrong with wanting money.
No.
Right? Some people
Money's
have different
fabulous.
relationships with money. What is a healthy way to look at money?
Well, first you have to understand that money is actually an outpicturing of your beliefs.
Can you go, what's outpicturing?
It's an outpicturing. So like what you're seeing in the physical, I'm sorry, I did not mean to just like plug my book.
No, you're good. You're good.
But what you see in the physical is actually, it's the physical representation of a lot of what you believe.
Yeah.
Okay. So this goes for everything. It's not just money, but you need to understand, that's one of the principles in my book that I discuss, is like, you need to understand that this is an outpicturing of your beliefs. So once you've got that piece in place, you can start to, again, so money is so, just as an idea, again, it's an idea, and I don't want to get too, philosophical here, yeah. But like, it's like anything else that especially though, with money, it's about your beliefs of worthiness, and it has a lot to do with it has a lot to do with intimacy and love, and like, there's a lot wrapped up. I
thought of that.
I know there's a lot wrapped up in money. But especially in terms of your sense of worth, right? Self-worth. And this, I think, is something that pretty much every single human struggles with. Even the ones that seem so sure of them. Actually, oftentimes the people who seem the surest of themselves will struggle with this. And so you'll see really unhealthy relationships with money. And that doesn't even mean just not having it. So there's like scarcity, but there's also having it never being enough. There's, I need more. There's so many different ways that our sense of deservedness will be represented through this thing that we call money, specifically money, because unlike this book, for example, you've got a lot of charge in money. So it holds a lot of charge as an object. Again, it's all, if we look at it from a subatomic perspective, it's
charge
all
like electrical charge, or charge as in value?
Charge as in energetic charge. So like the way you feel about money, like if I talk to you about money and you're in dire straits and you have, serious problems with money at the moment, you're going to feel a charge. You're literally going to feel a physical charge around money, and and this is one of the things that I'm often trying to encourage people to notice, is like, what's actually happening inside of you? What are the physical sensations that these ideas are provoking within you? Because if you can start to really get with that, your relationship, not just with money, but with everything else, will start to change. So for example, someone who is in, like I said, dire straits with money, when the thought impulse of money comes through their again, like prefrontal cortex, for example, what's going to happen is they start to hold on to it, and their ideas about that, or how they're holding on to that thought or that electrical impulse, is actually creating a kind of a signature. Okay. So what happens is you'll feel it in your body. So people will feel it in a very specific part of their body, and they'll feel usually it'll be like it could be tightness, it could be clenching, it could be some other kind of discomfort in your physical body. And most people, when they feel things like that, they don't even notice that that's actually what's happening, but they feel really gnarly. And so most of the time when you're feeling that way, you just want to go away from it. You want to escape, or you like create another narrative of I've got to create more, or you just run out, or you get something to eat, or you talk to somebody or whatever, but you distract yourself from that physical sensation. If instead you actually have the courage to sit with that, it's a great teacher. So you can learn a lot of things from it. It will eventually move into another part of your body. The energy will start to transmute. Now, again, if you want, I'll go into more of the science around this, but this is actually a physical phenomenon. So the more you start paying attention to that, and you start realizing and really kind of disassociating with like money as a separate entity, it's not separate from you. Nothing is. That's an illusion that we stay in to play this game that we're playing, that we call I'm Victor, I'm Cortney. Okay. So again, understanding some of these principles, and it's an awareness. So lots of times people think, I have to go out and get it. No, actually you just have to become aware that you are it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tuning that dial.
As well. Yeah. It's one way to think of it.
What would you feel when you're getting closer to your authentic self, when you're tuning that dial? Is it a sense of calm?
Oh, I feel it like, when I'm really in that, I just don't kind of want to go anywhere else, because I just feel like you just feel, I recently, for example, I'll go back to the previous discussion that we were having to kind of bring it all together. So I was giving a talk in Colombia to about 1,000 women entrepreneurs, and before I took the stage, the woman who was introducing me, person I totally adore, Tatiana Arias, she was up there, and she was sort of listing sort of my accolades and things in my career and all this stuff. And I was backstage very intentionally not listening, because I didn't want any of that to take the stage. I wanted that to take the stage, yes, but in service, as I was saying, to that force source energy, which is this thing that you're talking about that you call authentic, or that we might call authentic. It's the alignment with that, like I said, that force that beats your heart, that pumps the blood to your vital organs, etc. And when I went out there, it was literally like something took over, but yet I was fully present. I was fully aware. It's not like, I had, I was...
From a superficial standpoint, I think it would have made me nervous hearing all that stuff.
So in the past, I love what you're saying. So in the past, it would have made me nervous, and I would have thought, I need to perform. Yeah. Right? Exactly.
There's an expectation now, right?
Mm-hmm. So I talk about this a lot in my book, because we're all raised not all of us, but a lot of us, especially in America, are raised to like perform. Like monkeys in a circus, right? In a way. I don't mean that that happens all the time intentionally. It's like, do that thing that you do, for Johnny, like, make him laugh. You're so good at this, or sing or whatever. And when we get that sort of approval, and approval is a drug. Yeah. And actually, if you look at, like, lots of times people think it's social media that's the drug. It's not social media. It's the approval. That's the drug. That's the drug.
Should we even be trying to get approval from ourselves?
I don't know so much it's about approval as it is, like I said, this alignment with this force source energy, because that is always there for you, and it will always provide the answers that you need. And I know that might sound like woo-woo or blind faith, but I just want to qualify that for a moment, because if you look at it, we actually apply this blind faith to 99.999999. I don't even know how much % of our day to day. We actually have to for our survival.
Like your heartbeat for one? Or?
Right. So like, and not only what's happening internally. So like, I'm not going to bed being like, is my heart beating? Is it not beating? Is it beating? Is it not beating? Just in the same way that I'm not going to bed being like, is the sun going to rise tomorrow? Like, is that going to happen? I don't do that. Or most of us don't do that. We rely on it. We know that it will show up. Just like we also know the seasons are going to change, but we get so surprised. Like when the seasons in our life change, like, oh my God, I have a dry spell in my career, whatever. It's like, oh yeah, it's winter. Like chill, sit by the fire a little bit, it's like, but no, oh my God. And so we take this 0.00000 whatever 1% that's left over. And we're like, I got to control that. I got to make it happen. I have to hustle. Like, okay, maybe you like to hustle, but like, if you're not really enjoying that, then just take a step back and just notice like, how much of this could I delegate? And the reality is you can delegate all of it. But that is the scariest thing because we're taught, no, you have to control. So we live in this very precarious illusion of control. And the reason that we live in that is because it makes us feel some semblance of safety in a world that is constantly changing. But what we do know is that change is the only constant and that it will keep changing. And that who your best friend is tomorrow may not be your best friend. Yesterday. I'm sorry. My lines get scrambled with space-time. The space-time continuum is really flimsy for me. But anyway, so, we don't have those real reassurances. We just don't. And we cannot. But what we do know is there's this force source energy. And the ways in which it's transforming is not for us to know as an individual form of human consciousness, right? What is our opportunity is to, as much as possible, really align with it. And the way you know you're aligned is that you feel good. Like if you leave this conversation and you don't feel better than when you came into it, then I didn't do my job.
What's feeling better? Oh,
good. Excellent question. Do you feel like everything's tingling and all cylinders are firing and you're like, I'm not talking about from a perspective of me. I'm talking about a perspective of you. Did you come into something? Because anyone coming to your podcast is someone coming there because they know that there's some truth and some real truth that's being shared here. Hopefully that's one of the things I think that draws people to podcasts like these is that we're all craving for this truth. We're all craving for this sense of connection. And the farther away we get from it, the worse we feel. So if you listen to something like this, or you go somewhere, or you talk to someone, and you actually don't have, you actually leave it with maybe, you can describe it in any way you want. Again, there we go into the concepts. Like, what do I mean by that? So lots of times we might say, oh, I feel angry, or I feel sad, or I feel guilty. Those are concepts. They are mental constructs. Your body doesn't know what you're talking about. What your body knows is a constriction, a tightness, a sense of yuckiness, a sense of expansion, a sense of openness, a sense of excitement. And again, it's a felt sensation. It is not a label or a concept. So you will just feel, I feel lighter. I feel whatever, however you want to describe it is irrelevant. It's you feel it or you don't.
Just trying to bring some objectivity to it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. By the way, I love this. I mean, I'm not doing an ad for this, but like he had this. I know. I had this one time before in Texas, and I was just so grateful that Victor pulled it out of the fridge. It made me so happy. See, that's what I'm talking about. I was like, oh, everything's lighting up.
With I don't even know where do you want to take this?
It's your show, man.
What are we curious about these days?
Yeah,
what's it like
about?
being like?
Can I not take that off?
What's it like? You can if you want. What's it like speaking in front of large crowds?
I love it. I really love it. It's sort of my
I think
favorite thing to do. But it wasn't
before going on. Like you would ask God to just use you as a vessel. And from my perspective, that I think that superficially would help calm my anxiety. And whatever happens in a way. But there's still a lot of prep work that goes into that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I do a lot of preparation for my talks, 100%.
Is it like every word, enunciation, pauses, are those all, I know for some they're all planned, but how conversational, like this podcast is like all conversational, right? It's not really structured. Yeah. I might have a brief outline, but it's usually just a chronological order of your journey. And some, I don't even have that for some, right? So for you, what's it been like?
Well, it definitely started out like that, like learning all the tricks of the trade. And I think the only way you can really improvise is if you know the dance, kind of, again, it's that, I don't know where that saying comes from, but the only way to break the rules is to know them or something like that. And I have definitely studied speaking. I've been in positions where I've had to do a lot of it. And when I went from actually performing, and this is a key concept that's kind of come up a few times also in our conversation on the way over here, from performing to aligning, like I was talking about, really aligning to how the formless wants to express itself through this form. And I want to be mindful of, like, when I use the word God, that's my way of, it's my predominant way. I have many ways of talking about this force source energy that I'm referring to. And so the more I feel like, okay, I'm prepared for sure. Sometimes I've given talks where I didn't think I was prepared, in the sense that, like, for that particular talk, maybe I didn't spend as much time figuring out how I was aligning things, but I've been preparing for those talks my entire life, So in the sense that, like, my entire life goes into what I'm talking to you about right now, which again is just a snapshot of where my consciousness is right now. It's going to be somewhere else tomorrow. So for me, it's going from performance. Like, you could think, for example, we've all heard those speakers who enunciate everything perfectly and have the timing right and maybe say the funny thing, but they don't impact us. They don't leave us with a lasting impression. And Maya Angelou actually said it so beautifully. She said, people will never remember what you say, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And that, I think, is the ultimate, like, every interaction you have. I had a couple really bizarre interactions yesterday. I went to the bank. This is a good story. I went to the bank and I brought my sister-in-law's, I brought her huge truck. Like, I was driving this huge SUV, right? And I went in the bank and I saw these two elderly women they weren't totally they were on opposite ends of the parking lot, and they were sort of meeting. And I stopped and I waited for them to go. And one of the women just kind of angrily, like, said, go, So I went ahead to the parking, and since it's such a big vehicle, I had to kind of, like, adjust a little bit. So I, like, pulled it in, but then I pulled it back out. And as I was pulling it back in to park better, this woman literally comes up to the side of the car and she bangs on the window, and she's like, the same woman who, rushed me forward was like, you aren't looking where you're going. And I'm like, wow, I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry. And she just was so angry, and she kept kind of, like, going off of me. I was like, oh my God, like, what if I had hit this lady with this car, right? So I'm sort of like, oh my God, what's going on? And maybe I shouldn't have taken, I was feeling very good about driving this big SUV, but anyway, I get out of the car and there's these two Indian women, and they come up to me and they say, that wasn't your fault. That woman, like, kind of raced up to your car, and it's okay. Do you want a hug? I'm not kidding. I was like, wow. And I said, where are you from in India? Because one of my closest friends is from New Delhi. And I'm like, where are you from? And she's like, I'm from Mumbai. And the other one started telling me. So we had this, like, great interaction. I was just like, look, you can change someone's entire day by just a kind word. Or, like, I literally did hug both of them, and we ended up having, like, a conversation in the bank. But you can change someone. And if it's like, if that beautiful poem, if even one life has lived or has breathed easier because I have lived, that is to have succeeded. I think that was Eliot. Anyway, don't quote me on that one, but the quote is right. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't have to go out and do these, like, huge things, but the impact that you have on others. This was actually Jim Carrey. He said the impact you have on others is the greatest currency you have, or something like that. Jim, I'm so sorry. I love you to death. So if I got that wrong, forgive me. But anyway, it's true. It's true.
To be a contrarian, do we have to do anything?
No.
With our time?
No. Nothing. Like,
but
you will
to try to make the world better.
Well, I love the fact that you're asking this question, because this is the hang up. Like, and this is such an important, I'm really glad you're bringing this up. Thank you, Victor. Because there's this idea that if you're not ambitious, like, there's something wrong with you, and you should be ambitious, and, like, ambition is a good thing. But actually, ambition really gets in our way a lot of the times. What do I mean by that? I am totally about to botch this one up. So whoever does know where I'm quoting from and whatever,
As long
but
as we get the message.
the idea is there. Stay with me, stay strong with me. I want to say it was some sort of Chinese philosopher. I'm pretty sure about that part, but I can't remember who. Sorry, wherever you are. But the idea is like an archer.
Okay.
An archer who shoots with all of his passion and his skill will shoot perfectly. But the minute there's a brass buckle, and this was a long time ago, as the prize, the archer becomes less skilled, right? If there's a prize of gold, he becomes blind. Like he can't even see the target anymore. That's ambition. Ambition robs you of your sight. It robs you of what is just inherently yours. You're talking about doing, like not needing to do anything, but you will want to do something.
It's no longer pure.
Yeah, you'll want, well, I mean, that's a great word because pure actually comes from clear. Okay, so pure, what it means, like in its original meaning, is clear. So that's the perfect word for it. Like, are you clear? Are you untainted? Are you by concepts of like what you should be doing or whatever that is. And again, that's when the doing happens through you. So when you say you don't have to do anything, you will want to do something when you are really aligned with this. That'll just happen through you. Like, and that's where I think people get really off track sometimes because they're like, I have to do all these things. And there's merit to that. And I talk a little bit about that too in the book, like the efforting. There's a lot of merit to it. But I think when we're really, really in this, we experience the doing very differently. So you don't have to, you want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is there a better word than ambition then?
Well, and I mean, okay.
So how do we balance not being ambitious with creating, and I know you said you don't really subscribe to this, but like the vision. No vision and just try to think about just try to think about getting closer to your alignment. No, I'm glad you asked me to clarify that because I do believe in vision. There's a beautiful saying in the Bible, without a vision, the people perish. But I just don't think that it needs to be a very specific material outcome. And you can play with that. And it is fun to play with that. Yeah. I did that for years. My first book is all about how you do achieve those material ambitions. So I'm not against ambition. Ambition is not, we're using one word to describe a concept that you could interchange that word with the concept of inner motivation. So when we normally hear about ambition is like, you have to make it happen no matter what happens, no matter how tired you are, no matter what. You don't even listen to yourself. You listen to the goal. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. That kind of ambition, which is what's commonly referred to as ambition, is, I think can oftentimes lead people off track in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, it can lead to a lot of really uncomfortable situations for you, so, like hypertension and all that kind of stuff. What comes to mind then, more accurately in my head, is like external motivation. So on the way here, we were talking about it could be your parents. It could be this maybe promise of money or a certain lifestyle that externally motivates you to do something. Is that what you mean by that can blind you?
Oh, yes. It's when you don't know what I'm hesitant to use some of these words without qualifying them, but like that force percentage is like this formless energy that is the same stuff that, like I said, is beating your heart, right? It's designed, or you're designed rather, to be the physical expression of that. So when you're in that, you don't feel the efforting in the same way as when it's like, I have to do this thing so that someone approves of me, thinks this way about me. I did the thing I'm supposed to do, I should do, etc. Again, you're just going to feel very differently, physically, actually, as physical felt sensations. Yeah.
Which reminds me, in this book, you shared your experience of Satori. Can you kind of walk us through that experience? And I'm sure you did a great job, but I'm sure it was hard to put words to that experience. So it's funny. I did not think I would ever share that writing anywhere. And
the way that came about actually, because I talk about this at the beginning in the intro too, like I didn't have plant medicine, or it wasn't like something that was induced.
I was going to ask that. I was like,
no, I had never tried plant medicine up until time. I think plant medicine is great. And I think it has fantastic healing potentialities. From some things I've heard and read and studied, and I think a lot of what Michael Pollan is doing is very interesting. I'm very fascinated by it. But at that time I had never experimented with that or any other substances really, except for maybe I tried pot a handful of times. I think part of me thought I was like allergic to it at one point, and then I had another experience that I kind of liked it.
Plant medicine or psilocybin or any of that is a panacea for any of the issues that what the world is experiencing. Do you think the world would be a little better off if someone microdosed a bit of plant medicine? I
definitely think from the findings that I'm seeing, and also going back, like not just Michael Pollan, but a lot of Ram Dass's research, aka Richard Alpert, and who was the other one? Timothy Leary. The studies that they were doing were, I believe, groundbreaking. I mean, they were kicked out of a lot of those universities to then be brought back later as professor emeritus or something. But that research is so, I think it could potentially be a huge healer for a lot of the, I want to say like collective consciousness, or again, I don't want to get too esoterical. I'm going to bring it back. So that, I believe, actually is a potentially very powerful healer if brought in the right ways. Although I don't know what those are, and I'm definitely not an expert, but some of the things that I have been told and that I have seen have been very powerful, and I do think there's a lot there. But during that experience of Satori or awakening, before that I hadn't experimented with that. So was
it through breath work, or what led you to it?
That's a good question. I try to deconstruct it a little bit in the book. I had other experiences too, but this one that I'm talking about in the book actually lasted for 2 days. So I was in this, I don't want to say altered state of consciousness, probably in the truest state of consciousness, but it was like, I was desireless. It was such a, oh God, it was so blissful.
That being said, why isn't it sustainable?
Good question. What came through to me, and I want to answer your original question too, of like how that writing about that experience, what it was like writing about it. But the thing about living your life that way, or what, like I said, what came through, because toward the end of that experience, that one lasted for 2 days. And what came through for me was this message was coming through that I would never be relatable to anyone ever again. Like if I stayed in this state of no desire and no thought and no, it was just like everything was so blissful. It's just like, I didn't feel any sense of, guilt or responsibility or any of that. I just felt so free. I felt so free. And it was like such a blissful feeling. But at the same time, like I couldn't say anything. I couldn't talk because there was no purpose for talking. I instantly understood what was going through other psyches. Like it was really a beautiful, wild experience. I mean, if I told you the whole thing, because in the book, there's only part of that writing, but that writing was actually just streamed through me. The writing in the book and that part of the book, no part of it came from like, oh, I'm going to sit down and try to figure this out. It came right after, literally like a download.
Where were you? Italy, here?
I was in England.
England. Okay.
I was in England.
Were you a professor at one point?
I was. I also moonlighted as a professor and a waitress. I've done lots of.
Was that simultaneously?
No.
Okay.
But that would make me even cooler probably. But no, I did. I was a professor for the University of Iowa. Wow. But they were working with this consortium of universities, so I was teaching for a lot of different, like University of Oregon, and it was all Big 10 U.S. universities. And I was a professor. Yeah, in the MBA program. That was a long time ago. long time ago.
Many lifetimes.
Yeah.
So then through the awakening, this bliss, what, I guess, brought you back to earth?
I'm like, am I going to get a chance to take a sip of my Topo Chico? It's so funny. Yeah. I just pronounce this like Italian, but it would be Chico. Anyway.
I love it. I also want to know like how long it took you to become fluent.
Oh, I actually picked that up pretty darn quick, so and not to be like, but languages, I really dig languages. So like, I don't know, I just really get in there.
What other languages do you speak?
I speak French really well.
Okay.
I speak Spanish
Was that
really
since
well.
high school, or was it Spanish in high school?
No. I took Spanish in high school,
Yeah.
and actually, my dad spoke fluent Spanish, but he would never speak to any 5 of us in Spanish because he was, he wasn't very proud of like his background.
Oh, okay.
And his ethnical background, and so he never ever spoke Spanish to us. But I still remember when I was young and I would pronounce the words, and my dad would be like, "Oh wow, you actually say them right. You know, you don't have an accent."
Yeah.
And I kind of think I'm a little bit of a shapeshifter, so I have this sort of, I don't know, the way I'm designed. So like, for instance, even in Italy, I live up north, so I have a Veneto accent when I speak Italian. But if I go down south for a little bit, or even central Italy, my accent changes, and I'm not trying to do that. It just doesn't feel right to speak to them
Sure.
like in any other way. So it's a weird sort of shapeshifter thing.
And it's not like you're trying.
No, my God, no. And
Yeah.
actually,
Some
I
people
got so frustrated by it.
Want to be
in certain
perceived authentically, right?
Oh God. You know, I used to be like, who the hell am I? I was like, what the heck? You know, things would change in mannerisms. Like I pick them up, but I don't want to, you know, I remember them doing this leadership training back when I was at Vanity Fair Corporation, and they were talking about mirroring, right? And so you have these neurons in your brain, right, that mirror others' neurons, right? So and this again is so fascinating from a quantum perspective, but I'll keep it under control. But anyway, we have these mirror neurons, right? And basically what they say is like, you're smiling, I smile. So actually a good sign of a sociopath is like, if you smile and they just don't smile. Or like they say this about yawning, right? Like a sociopath will not yawn if they see you yawn. And so it's like, be careful if like, you know, it's kind of a joke, but kind of not. Actually, yawning is so miraculous. Please yawn. Everyone listening, that's one thing I will say. Yawn as much as you can. Okay. Anyway, so I digress. Where were we? Right. We were talking about...
I know.
Now I got on yawning. So part of me is thinking like we had pizza before this. So part of me is like, wait a second.
Time for a nap, I know.
Exactly.
I took you down a path of like multiple languages. But I guess I also wanted to... I think I asked you how you came back to Earth from the awakening. Like why... You had no responsibilities, no desires. You just felt free. And why come back?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I tell you, like I said, spent 2 full days in that frequency. And it was funny. My friend's daughter, who kind of isn't all that social with me, or she wasn't so much all the time, but like she came in my room and she sat on my bed, and her friend came and sat on my bed too, because I was staying with this friend of mine in London, and they were just close to me. And I was like, humanity is like bringing me back. Like, I don't know, the human experience is like calling me back. That's the closest I can come to express why. And I slowly started to like come back in those ways that I had been for others, you know, previously. But it was very, there definitely was like, I definitely, and it wasn't like I was making a decision. It wasn't like I was making a decision. It was almost like this part just was like, if you stay like this, you're not going to be able to do any of this, like what we're doing right now. And
like, were you eating through the 2 days?
I didn't eat and I didn't drink. I didn't even have water. My friend was like, you have to drink water. I was like,
you were by yourself or with a friend?
My friend was there, and I was mostly just by myself.
Which reminds me, when we were talking about plant medicine, we're not saying just start dropping acid or plant medicine left and right.
Yeah.
Research is usually done under supervision.
Oh yeah.
A guide.
I think, yeah. I have some friends who are doing work in that field, and also just exposing themselves. And I think that there's a lot of potential there, but I definitely, like I said, definitely not an expert, definitely not advising anyone to go for that route. But
sorry, you might have shared it, but like, what put you in that state in the first place?
Oh, okay. So so this is the thing. I feel like there's all these like open doors here, and whoever's listening, like we'll come back at some point. Victor's going to come to Italy. We're going to have the conversation there. Right, Victor?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sì, certo, ovvio. Okay. So what got me into that? So the closest I have come to deconstructing that experience was I had actually been studying brainwave frequencies. I had been studying so-called altered states of consciousness. I had been studying a lot of things in like physics, metaphysics, all of these sorts of concepts that I was trying to really understand and figure out how do I do that, because I was so enthralled by being, for example, in theta with my eyes wide open, I wanted to know how to be in delta with, like having this conversation.
Yeah, it's in the book,
I wanted to understand a lot of that. And I really wanted to experience it. So I did have a kind of a burning desire for that. And then I also had been doing quite a lot of meditation and
like Vipassana or what kind of?
No, it wasn't Vipassana.
Oh, okay.
No, it was literally just like I'm sitting in a room and I'm just, chilling.
Like silent retreats
I have lots of different interpretations on meditation. I actually just submitted some answers for Livestrong about meditation because I actually think our definitions and ideas of meditation can often be very erroneous, but that's another conversation. But let's say rather than meditation, I would just say like deep presence and deep listening. Okay. I'm going to actually reframe. I'm going to call it that. So I had been in that, but, and this is really crucial. And this is all in chapter 5 of my book is I gave up in a sense. Like I was just like, fuck it. Sorry. I hope I can swear on this podcast. You can delete that, like beep that part out. Remember what minute this is. I was like, I'm just not going to get it. It's not going to happen for me. And I sort of like gave up, but I got really silly. And this has happened to me so many times. I have had this happen to me on multiple occasions where then I've had major, major breakthroughs because I had all this efforting. And then it was the moment that I relaxed around the efforting that the response could come in and it was like, boom. And it's happened to me so many times now that I think this is the closest I've come to deconstructing it is like, you have to actually get playful, like relaxed, playful with it. But I do believe that the effort is I
just got to share. You were the most playful on the dance floor at the wedding. Yeah, she was all up in it, guys.
I was on it. You guys we're gonna have to get some footage in here of that. Did you get some pictures and some? I know you did. That's blackmail material right there. Blackmail
in the best way.
Good. No, I was having so much fun, and my nephew was actually throwing me around the dance floor. Did you get any of that? Because I was like, did somebody please get this? I was literally like. In 2 inches or like, I don't even know. Anyway, I'm saying inches, but my brain thinks in centimeters. So anyhow, yeah. And so that's the closest I got, but it was so funny because so many times it's just been relaxing into it. But as I was saying, I think the efforting is important. And if you look at any of kind of like the major discoveries and revelations that we see throughout history of so-called great minds, I'm not, to compare, but at all. But it's like you see that there's this massive amount of efforting and then there's a relaxation around it. So you'll often hear of great discoveries happening right before, right in sleep states, for example, or like when I used to joke that like my greatest ideas came to me in the loo, like in the bathroom, because it would just be like, it was like I finally just chilled out enough for the thing to come through. And actually, this is how a lot of my writing is coming through now. Not in so much in this book, unfortunately. Like I wish I knew this stuff before, but now it's like a lot of things like interview questions and stuff. I literally just I lay down, I get in a totally relaxed state, and I allow the question. I sit fully with the question, and the answer just starts to come through perfect. Like it's perfect, and I just dictate it in my phone, and it goes out. But I couldn't do this before, so I really couldn't. And because again, I couldn't. Cortney, couldn't do that, and Cortney, can't do that. But this force source energy can, and so I sort of relax into it with all of the knowledge that I've accumulated up into this point. All of that goes into again, presented as a persona, as a character, but it's coming from somewhere else now, which is awesome.
And did it transcend like the senses, or was there like a visual or a smell or a sound attributed to it, a bodily feeling attributed to it?
To the writings or to
that feeling of awakening?
Oh my God. No, it did not.
Or just a stream of like consciousness flowing, and you're just like, oh.
It was the perfection of everything. Like I was literally walking around, and this will sound like I was on something because I could see the geometrical, I could see that in everything and everyone. I know this really sounds crazy, and I tell you, I honestly I did not think I was going to put this in the book. I never thought I would talk about this. In fact, I was on another podcast recently where I was talking about another experience, which is not in the book, which I have never shared publicly. And, but I have had multiple experiences like this. So I was talking about it there to be like, I can't believe someone like me, cause corporate background and all these things, like I'm talking about this stuff, but it's so beautiful. And I felt like this is the time, to start sharing this. So, from this perspective, because you are the drug. Like, you are the medicine. And it's waking up to that. And yes, to answer your question, it was such a deep sense of bliss with everything. Like, I remember there was this point, and I was taking a shower, and I literally felt like I could feel every drop. And I was just it was just such a luxury. But I remember pulling the towel up between, my hands and my face, and I actually sighed out, like, this is why I love to be human. Like, I could feel the heat being generated between my hands, the towel, and my face. And I was like, this sensation, this is why, this is it, And it was such a wild, because I was fully aware in a way I had never been aware before. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm tripping out or like whatever. It was like total and complete presence and awareness and peace and bliss and like all the things.
Was it singular or was it tangential?
In how do you
In the sense of your thoughts can just go on tangents, like this conversation, or was it like a singular, like, hyper focus on one thing? Did you feel like you were directing anything, or you became truly like an empty vessel? I
was just in harmony with everything, and I think that's actually how we're supposed to live. But we just have gotten so far removed from it. Mm-hmm. It's like we're in harmony. We don't have to do this hurting each other, or just like racing to things or whatever. It was just like everything. But even that you can see the beauty in it. Like I didn't have any, even when I was around people, because I remember getting back to my friend's place, and this whole thing started on a train. And when you hear her tell the story, it's even more bizarre than when I tell it, because she was witnessing a lot of this. And, but I remember getting back there, and it was like, I couldn't really be around people because I could hear all their thoughts and like non-thought, and I could see all their tendencies to like prove, and everything that I had spent lifetimes to kind of try to overcome. I was so acutely aware of all of it, but in a total non-judgment place. Like, there was no part of me that was like, it was just awareness. I was just pure awareness.
Do you think there are levels to that? Levels to Satori?
I don't really buy into like the idea of levels, because again, it was oh God, I love him so much. Alan Watts, he would say like, my guru is better than your guru. It's like, I don't think we need to think in terms of levels, or even like we were saying earlier, like arriving. You're already you're already there. So I think where we get hiccups is, again, thinking like, oh, well, first I have to do this thing and this other thing and all these other things. Those things can be great. In fact, I've done a lot of that. And I even talk about a lot of that even in this second book, because there is an efforting, there is a thinking, like, if you don't think you're there, you don't think you're it, there is, that period of like trying to discover that piece. But once you've discovered it, then you start to allow a lot of these really profound experiences that actually are available to you.
So it's like on or off. You're either aware or unaware.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to, it's very simple. See, like, I was saying before, I was quoting Da Vinci, the simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. One of the things I say in the book is like, you're not paying attention. We're not paying attention to our attention. And you just kind of nailed it right there. Like, you're either aware or you're not aware. You're aware of the truth of what you are, or you're not. And it's okay to not be. And it's totally cool. Like, if you yelled at somebody this morning when you got out of the car, like those ladies, like, it's fine. Like, it doesn't say anything about you. It says something about, I guess, just like how connected or aware you are or not. Yeah.
So
that's one way.
As beautiful. Interconnected as we are, it could still feel like the world is on fire sometimes. Whether at the micro level in Chicago, it could be, at the time, Black Lives Matter. It could be all the carjackings that go on in the city. It could be the mayoral race. It could be when NASCAR was in town. At the global level, it could be Brexit, the pandemic, whatever. Ukrainian war, right? That's still going on. So, with all the tragedy that's going on, is there a way I don't know, now we're just getting prescriptive, but like, should we be still, like, how do we remain hopeful, and should we even remain hopeful? Or do we just be apathetic? Because I think, for the most part, if not all of it, I subscribe to whatever's in your control. But then there are some people that feel like they have to care about everything, and that's not wrong either. But to the extent where they sacrifice their own well-being. So I know it's a very individual, subjective question, but like, how much should you care about everything that's going on in the world? There's so much to care about.
I think the greatest thing you can do for the world, for humanity, is to be the healthiest, most vibrant, and version of yourself. And I also think we don't need to be as gosh, I could go in so many different directions with this. But I think that for me, the simplest answer to that is like, it can get so overwhelming. But again, if you can bring it back to like, well, how am I showing up? Because you're a cell in the body too. And if you find something really, really offensive, it also means that that's something you gotta like, sit with, as well as, again, like as a sensation. Because lots of times we think like this thing's bad or this thing's the other, this thing is good, this thing's right, this thing's wrong. But I think that actually transcending that to see like this is all part of the consciousness that we are. It's in us. And when you can sort of face the music of that, then the music starts to change. But I think denying it, resisting it, getting angry at it can oftentimes perpetuate a lot of, like what we're seeing versus, and I am not talking about like, oh, just be happy and smile and pretend like everything's great.
By not being angry, it doesn't mean you're apathetic to it.
No, but also you can also get angry. Like that's okay. And I think that's one of the things that people don't realize, like there's so much beauty actually in the entire spectrum of our emotions, but yet we are taught, and I just had a few conversations about like a few interviewers were talking to me about toxic positivity. Oh my God, now my mouth is not moving anymore. They were talking to me about toxic positivity, and I was just saying like it's seeing the beauty in the entire spectrum, but also really being with it on your own too, in ways that you can start to receive what it's there to show you, what it's there to teach you, what it's there to offer you. Like sometimes people say bad weather, but I don't know if you've ever watched a storm come in and the absolute majesty of it. Like, why do we call it bad? Ooh. It's freaking amazing. Oh. Like you don't sit and watch the ocean and say like, oh, that's a good wave. That wave behaved. Like that wave came in a really soft way. Oh my God, that's like a crashing wave. It's the worst wave I've ever seen. Like we don't do that, right? But yet we say like this emotion is okay and that emotion's not. Now I'm not saying don't emotionally like just know how to do that as an adult. But what I am saying is like find the safe spaces where you can explore the spectrum of your humanity, because it's being human, and like and find the ways that you can actually just enjoy the absolute brilliance of it. Because I think when we try to say like, oh, I don't want to look at this, or I don't want to, or whatever, or that's a bad thing or whatever, we are closing ourselves off to the teaching opportunities available to us through everything and everyone. Yeah.
Another storm metaphor I've heard recently is we can't control when a storm rolls in, but you can control when you carry an umbrella. But I do agree that storms can be beautiful too. And maybe it's just a change in perspective, or just allowing you to feel all the emotions and not just the happy ones.
Well, and it's also this like obsessive need to control. Like you control when you have an umbrella, maybe, maybe not. And then like you might have it. And that's what I was just about to say. Like you could get hailstorm and there's like a bunch of holes in it. Like experience it. Like again, another thing, like I've been under just torrential downpour. I used to literally, this is crazy. This is nuts. I used to years and years and years ago when I lived in Chicago for a brief period, I did it at least once or twice. I ran through the streets of Chicago barefoot under torrential rain, like when it would downpour because no one would be in the city. And I would just be running through these streets. And I still remember like the sensation, like how amazing that was. And just now I think about the idea of going barefoot in Chicago. I'm like, no, thank you. The OCD in me is like, no. But at the time, I guess it was a little freer. But yeah, it's, actually I should do that again, but okay, I digress once again. But yeah, so I think it's like, how do we actually enjoy all of it as much as we can, while we're experiencing
and
this
it's not necessarily
flesh.
enjoy.
And
It's just feel, right?
yeah, but that's exactly it. Because when I say enjoy, I don't mean like smile all the time and everything's great. I literally mean like enjoy in the sense of like like go into the depths of that, of whatever that is. And that is like, when I think of enjoyment, I think of like, not necessarily like this thing tastes good, but just like, this is it. Like, I'm living, you know what I mean?
Right,
and
right.
yeah, maybe enjoyment's not the right word, but yeah.
I dig that. To come back more to superficial level, I guess.
Good.
Like, tell me, like, why Italy? How did you end up there?
Okay.
And how did you make it work? And if it was like
One
pretty
day at a
early
time.
on when the entrepreneurial journey started, take us back there to the beginning of Italy.
Yeah. Well, Italy's a long story, but what I will say is it's definitely one day at a time. And it's definitely like, I moved first to London. I did my postgraduate work there, the London School of Economics many, many, many moons ago. And then I wrote my dissertation in France, in the south of France, in Toulouse.
So wait, was it an MBA and then a PhD, or?
No, I don't have a PhD.
So was it an MBA?
Yeah, it was MSc.
MS?
Yeah, Master of Sciences. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I completed that program, and then I was, like I said, writing my dissertation, which I moved to Toulouse in France for. And I had actually met my husband then, now my ex-husband. I had met him there in London. So after France, I moved to Italy. He was from Italy. He is from Italy. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had a guide then when you went to Italy.
I had what?
A guide.
A guide. Yeah, I had many. I have many guides. Is that not clear? I have many, many. They're all here. I'm just like
Yeah. And when you guys separated, what kept you there?
Well, many things, but most importantly, my daughter. So she's been raised there, and who knows? I mean, right now we're also talking about the idea of maybe moving back to the States. I mean, I don't know where life is going to take me, but at that time it was the clearest decision. And so I'm still living there.
I think it's beautiful to see someone who is so flexible, even as we get older. I think I'm curious as to like if I'll ever become a curmudgeon and feel rigid as far as like trying to change my ways for whatever the next generation is coming up with, whether it's technology or something else. Like, I think the edge of it was maybe when NFTs started coming out. Just like, NFTs, what are NFTs?
Oh God, I was the same. And I had a client who was like, NFTs, and we talked about it for like a number of sessions. I was just like, yeah, I'm way past my
The ability to speak a handful of languages. Have you been able to wrap your head around certain concepts or explain other concepts better or more effectively because you're multilingual?
I think most definitely. But I've always had a love of language.
Yeah.
And I'm a big geek about etymology and the origins of words and the origin of words. And I've often, been very curious about why we use the words we use. And I'm also very, very aware oftentimes of like the vibrational impact of the words that we use. And so, yeah, I mean, in the beginning was the word. So
what was the original? Was there like a handful of originals? Like whether it's like Greek, Latin, other, I'm not sure. But like, does it all trace back to an original language or a handful of original languages? I mean,
obviously you have Greek, you have Latin for sure, but you also have like on the other side of that, like you have languages that are almost devoid of, grammar. I mean, we have so many languages in the world. I think, most of what in the English language and with these Romance languages, most of when you're looking at it from an etymological standpoint, you're looking at Greek, you're looking at Roman influences. But a lot of in English, you get a lot of also more modern day French usages, like other languages as well, come in there and become relevant in the ways that they transformed language as well. But I think it's just a curiosity of, when you're just curious, like you,
Do you find yourself explaining certain things in a certain language because it's more fitting?
I find myself oftentimes speaking a language and not knowing that that's the one I was speaking. Like I sometimes I'm like, oh crap. Like for example, I went to this guy recently. I was just getting a body treatment by my brother's house, and for some reason with this gentleman, like I always want to speak Italian. Like my brain just doesn't want to speak to him in English, and I didn't even realize.
Does he speak Italian?
Well, no, but I didn't realize at the beginning that he wasn't native from here. Like when I first met him, but something inside me was like, didn't initially go to English. And it's funny because I didn't even realize that until this time going to him. I was like, whoa, I actually, my brain doesn't want to speak to you in English or something weird like that. So I have strange hiccups like that. And I often have times where I can find the perfect expression for something in another language, or my brain will just say, this is the expression, and it won't match what I can find in another language potentially. Yeah. And so, all those types of
which makes me think of a state of flow, because you're not really thinking about it at that point. Are there certain circumstances or contexts where you notice to be in flow, where time kind of disappears, where things seem seamless?
Lots of times. I mean, I have a very bizarre relationship with time. And I think the more you live kind of full out, the more I have a very strange time paradox that is ever present for me, which is I will feel like something that happened yesterday happened lifetimes ago, but I'll also feel like it was a blink ago. So I have like this, almost like I lived so much life, like there was so much packed into that day or that week that I just feel like I've lived so much. It's so rich. But again, it creates this really awesome time paradox because I'm feeling it in both ways simultaneously. I'm feeling it like that happened forever ago, and I'm feeling it like it happened yesterday. So
you're just so present.
I don't know.
Well, it's the Dr. McGill who was on recently. He said his daughters would sometimes say, "Papa, I'm bored," and like I shared this in the last clip, and he was like, "Don't say bored. That just means you're not curious enough."
Yeah. It's like, how could you be bored? But also the overstimulation creates this sense of, like next thing. There's a lot of.
What's your take on routines? Do you like routine?
I love routines, and I also love breaking them up. But I think both are essential.
I meant to say this in the beginning, but I didn't know who said this about you, or if it was self-described. Like Eat, Pray, Love meets 4-Hour Work Week.
It was definitely not self-prescribed. I could never come up with something that clever. It was like a Harvard valedictorian / best-selling author who said that about my first book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that resonate? Does that still resonate?
Well, I thought it was really catchy and really well written. I don't know that I ever considered whether or not it resonates with my being. I know that I think that first book was the beginning of a really powerful heart journey for me, into just figuring out what this expression is here. And it's I think it's a really great starting place for someone who is really inundated and has a lot of distractions and sort of external, things vying and people vying for their attention. So, yeah.
We've already mentioned a few concepts in the book. Is there anything that you want the audience to know before, or anything else about the book? Or I don't know if we said it. Give yourself permission.
Thank you.
What would you like
so nice.
people to know?
Oh, well.
Be confident. Be happy. Be you.
Yeah. Well, first, since you just read the subtitle, I think it's really important to, again, say, like, when I'm talking about being confident and being happy and being you, they're not like what we're used to. They're not. You'll see in the book that this isn't like be boastful and know how to stand up and, whatever that looks like. And even about happiness, it's like you can experience so much joy in the deepest depths of darkest pain. You just can't even imagine how glorious it is. Like I said, it's like watching those dark clouds come in and the majesty of it. And I know that sounds kind of nuts, but it's an openness to it. So anyway, you'll see if you read the book kind of what I really mean by some of those concepts. But the only other thing I might say is that people have the tendency to kind of move on to the next thing. Yeah. Like by the way, if you made it through this whole thing, listening, like, and watching, you're just a total rock star and we love you. Oh my God. All of my hats, like metaphorical and otherwise, are coming off right now for you. But what I will say is the real work is in you just keep showing up until it's yours. And this is what I wanted for this book is like, I am not telling you anything that you don't know, but this book might open up that awareness. And instead of maybe going from one book to another thing, and like, what's the other thing that's going to save me or fix me or whatever that is, like, we can all go into that, but like really getting with something, if it resonates with you, if this interview and this beautiful, or conversation, I should say rather, resonates with you, go back to it. Because if there's something there, then you're going to find deeper depths of yourself the more you revisit it. And I think that's where a lot of us stay on the surface, since you talked about being on the surface of these questions, and they're very profound, actually, a lot of them. But it's like, that's where we miss the mark sometimes, in just going to that place where, again, we can create that deep listening. And that's what this book is designed to do, is like really remind you, not to tell you anything, just remember.
If for your next live event, you were to create an interactive journal, what are some prompts in that journal that you would include?
Oh, wow. This is not a question.
Not to put you too much on the spot, but...
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh. I actually think a lot of that work, sometimes that self-reflection work I think sometimes it almost overcomplicates things.
Yeah.
So I actually wouldn't want to give anyone a prompt. I would literally just be like, oh, can you just sit with the creative void from which you come and which all of this comes? Can you just sit in that thing that you call silence? It's actually not silence, but I mean, what we describe as silence. Can you be with yourself, like, for just a couple minutes a day? Like, that would be there. Out of there, you'll get your own prompts. You'll start to intuit, understand, potentially hear, potentially see things. It's different for everyone. But I would say, like, yeah, really get with yourself. Like, that's it. You don't need them.
And then you do practice meditation. Is there something that, like a routine that you put yourself through, or is it more of a mindfulness meditation? Is it anything to do with breath work?
I think all those things are great, but
Yeah.
I think meditation, like the most accurate definition that I would have for meditation, because lots of times we get, again, very prescriptive about this, like, do this type of breath work and sit in this position and hold a mudra and repeat a mantra, and like all those things can be great. They're wonderful. Lots of them are very healing and potentially very powerful instruments. But when I'm talking about meditation, it's kind of like a grooving with like all that is, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm just gonna like chill out here with you for a second. I'm just gonna be with this force source energy that I'm talking about in any way that feels good to you. And I think, again, the moment we start getting into a lot of modalities or, kind of technical ways or things, it can actually, I think lots of times it can be great in the sense of like efforting until you get to this point. But you could also just jump to this point of like, I'm just going to just be in it. And like, even in meditation, lots of times I will move around. I might even, because meditation for me is just, I'm just seeing how much I can feel this energy that I'm talking about. So yeah, I mean, there's no one way. I do oftentimes do kind of guided meditations that just come through me. But I never know what's going to come through. And I do those sometimes with clients, or sometimes in, different venues, workshops and things when I do it. But yeah, I don't have a specific one or to recommend, or even. Is
there, because I was going to ask you to lead one, but I guess we'll just leave it open for people to flow through. Is there a live event or a workshop or anything else besides this book that you're hoping to manifest? And, if we were to have a big piece of cardboard on there.
Oh, gosh. It's just, honestly, the most important thing for me right now is just staying, as much as I can, just kind of returning to this awareness as throughout everything, So it's not necessarily about a milestone, but I really do love, kind of like my most favorite thing is the stage work. So I definitely see a lot more of of that, because I do kind of more select talks right now and very specific and kind of quote unquote high level environments. And I'm like, I really love the ones where I'm getting a chance to talk to more people.
So more private in this sense?
No, I think I would actually welcome more public, because I do a lot of private.
But how
public
many,
speaking.
is there an ideal number of guests?
No.
I remember seeing, like, especially during the pandemic, like Tony Robbins would do like a virtual one. No, you just see screens, and it's the reason why I'll never do a remote interview or a remote podcast. I'm missing something, and I had a Netflix special, and Tony and his character comes alive, and it's contagious, and it helps everyone else come alive. But the reason why I prefer this EMT class rather than teaching online is because there's a smaller number of students, and it's a little bit more intimate, and I actually see if they're doing well or not.
Yeah.
What kind of live event? More of you speaking, more of a discussion?
I mean, I'm open to all of it. I just like being in person with people. I'm definitely also more in favor of being in a live venue. I do some stuff online, but I definitely prefer seeing people.
Would you ever like do one in Italy?
I've had a lot of requests for that, and I've kind of avoided it because I sort of prefer to do most of my public speaking over on this side of the ocean. I do some. It's just kind of my little, it's like when I go to Italy, it's kind of like, well, I mean, it's not, my home is everywhere, I feel like, but it's more kind of like I go there sort of also like a, kind of the recoup type of, not necessarily out there as much.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've done some TV interviews and stuff like that over there, but I kind of try to, as much as possible, keep it. Do you think, because I do you think it'd be a good environment for people to feel more comfortable to become that vessel to feel more if it was a certain type of retreat? Oh gosh. Yeah. It's a great place for that. I actually was talking a little bit about that with Jameson, my niece, the other day, because I was talking about this property that I might want to get there in Italy. And I was saying, like, I could do some like really tiny, amazing, events with some people there. And that'd be incredible. But, and I also know the Italian, a lot of Italians ask me if I do this work, and they want to come to this work, and they would love to come to a talk. I get messages a lot.
Was your TED Talk in Italy?
It was. It was in Padova. Yeah. So I do get a lot of requests for it, but I just have, kind of avoided it.
Which brings me to the next topic, boundaries, right? Is that something you had to learn? Did you take on a lot at some point and you felt overwhelmed?
I definitely think that the more we just, subtract from our kind of plate, like I definitely try to keep really focused on the things that are super important for me and not dilute my energy too much. That's for sure.
But when did you learn that?
When?
Yeah.
Over the years. And you're right. I mean, I don't know if I would have called it boundaries so much as like exhaustion of like trying to be all over the place, and also diluted focus, which never really gets you, or, it just feels uncomfortable to me personally. It feels like some people are great at it. Like some people they thrive off of like focusing on 20 different projects. I'm not that person. I do feel like I have a very diverse life and interest range, and I do a lot of different things throughout the day. Like you might catch me playing the guitar, or like writing a song, or
would you have these feelings of like, these are once in a lifetime opportunities, even if they all came at once? And you feel like FOMO did you coin the term JOMO?
No, I didn't coin it. I saw it somewhere and I put it in my book because I put that I found that on Instagram, which is so funny because it's like the mecca of FOMO. But yeah, the joy of missing out is really brilliant. And no, I actually, so for me, I don't usually feel that. I know I used to. I definitely used to feel some serious FOMO, but now I'm so aware of my own like self, I guess I could say, to be like, this is of interest or it's not, and I'll feel it instantly. Like when I met you, it was like, yeah, I like this dude, like let's talk, you know what I mean? And I don't always feel that, and I will often turn things down because time is, it's very important to me how I direct my attention, I would say even more than time. And so, but if I'm feeling that kind of thing, I will respond to it because I feel it. And so it's not really that hard for me anymore because I am in this deep, deep listening.
Some would describe it as like feeling 100% fuck yes about it, and if you don't, then it's a no.
I don't always have that 100%. Like
Interesting.
I
Okay.
oftentimes will be like on the fence, and when I am, I have to go in that deep listening because it does mean that I'm too distracted most of the time. And then when I go in the deep listening, like I'll know what I'm supposed to do, or where I'm supposed to go, or who I'm supposed to speak with, or whatever. I don't always have that 100% like yes immediately.
Appreciate you this sharing.
But I also talk in the book about how to test that yourself. Like if you do have that ambiguity around making choices, talk about, some of what we were talking about on the way over, kinesthesiology and stuff like that.
I think it was you that said this, but you said you can in fact have your cake and eat it too, but you can only have one cake.
yeah, I did. I've been saying this thing for years. So I'm like, who the hell said you can't like have your cake and eat it? Like, what are you supposed to do? Stare at the damn thing? Like, what does that mean? I never understood that phrase. So yeah, I think you absolutely have to have your cake and enjoy it thoroughly, which includes all of it, like even the sensation of like I'm super full, but having a lot of cakes at the same time or making a lot of cakes at the same time while you're eating other cakes,
so
like
you can have more than
one,
just not at the same time. Okay, that clarifies it.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that like I want to sort of qualify that by saying I actually do have a lot of like running projects, but they all have, to go back to your point, they do have an overarching vision. Like I have a vision.
They're all kind of connected.
Oh, they're definitely connected. Like everything that I do, but I also have a lot of people who help me too. So
multi-layered cake.
Yeah, I have like a lot of people who help me behind the scenes to do what I do and to keep a lot of things running. For
like VAs or people in person.
Actually, my entire team is remote. Like
that's
my
entire
entire
the whole
team
4
is
hour
remote.
work week.
My entire team is remote. And it's a lot of people.
When did you first buy into that process?
When I realized that like Italy is an almost impossible place to hire people. Like it is so ridiculous to hire people in Italy. So, and it's nuts. And they go into like contratto indeterminato, which means things like you will get a contract that's like basically for life. Like it's almost impossible for me to fire you. Like it's crazy in Italy. And the bureaucracy in Italy is nuts.
So it's not that they don't want to work. It's not that hard work or good work is hard to find. It's that you'd be tied with them forever, or
it's not necessarily that you're tied with them forever, but the bureaucracy and the levels of just red tape and difficulty around hiring people directly in Italy is insane. But I do think the fact that I have run businesses in Italy means that I could probably do it anywhere in the world because it's so difficult. Like they do not make it easy, and like you can't expense anything, like unless it's crazy. Like if I told you, that would be a whole nother, we're not going there. But
that's so interesting. But
what I will say is it like made it pretty much impossible for me to do that. So, but I have another business here. So I do a lot of, I do a lot of international business.
Where's a good source for remote help?
I don't know the answer to that question. At the beginning, it was really hard for me to find the right people. Like when I first started out on my own, I think there was a lot of, I just wasn't finding the right fits. But for years I've worked, like my core team is all the same people for years. And, but I actually I had to realize that like the most important question that I had to answer and that I had to ask myself and be able to answer in the affirmative was like, would I want to have a beer with this person on a Saturday night? Like not, do they have all the skill sets that I'm requiring? Not, of course I want somebody to be able to show me like they've done it, or they get what I'm talking about. They're interested. They love it. They're enthusiastic about it, whatever. But it was like, do I want to hang out with them? That's kind of became my number one question. And since that it was like, I hired people that I liked. And
you don't hear that too often.
Yeah. No,
I've heard of it, but you don't hear it too often. I think recently I've been asking people like, their hiring practices in the sense of like, how do you vet if someone cares? Because to me, you can teach all the technical skills if they don't have it already. And I just want someone, not maybe care as much as I do, but care enough to do good work, at least, to give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to hire good people. I mean, good people in the sense of like, yeah, people who are well adjusted, you know, and like not bringing their stuff to the workplace, to like in the sense of,
and maybe you
all
discover
of us
that
have it, but
over
like
a beer.
but like yeah, but like all of us have it, but it's like, you know, how well adjusted and how enthusiastic is this person about their life and therefore what they're doing and you know, all that. And I mean, there's multiple maybe potential questions, but yeah,
maybe like asking them, what do they care about? Maybe. Yeah. What else? We can wrap up, but like, what else are you curious about these days?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm eternally curious. I love what you're doing. And I just want to say that before we do close is
Thanks.
like, you're doing really, really fantastic work. And I've seen a lot of it and it's really touching. And I think, again, also whoever's watching, like you're here and you're connecting with this work. It really says a lot about you as well, the listener. So just kind of want to shout that out before we do wrap here. And thank you so much for having me and for,
It's
like,
been an awesome ride.
It was really funny. By the way, everyone, Victor and I met in a bathroom. We did. We met in a bathroom.
We did.
We did. We met in a bathroom.
Yeah. And I was like,
I feel like I should qualify that. Hold on.
I
wait.
was like, I know you.
Yes, exactly. So I walk into the bathroom at my, so like my sister-in-law, who's my best friend, who's the mother of Jameson. So I walk in to her parents', you know, the bathroom that's up there. And I'm about to go to the bathroom. But anyway, I find Victor in there with a wedding dress. I mean, Victor, come on. So I find him there, you know, he's like, it's awesome. And I really felt like, oh, this dude's really cool. But then I'm like, oh, I can't just like start talking to this. This is going to be creepy and weird. Like the aunt
before
who just
we
was
said
like,
anything? Or?
Yeah. Before we said anything. And then all of a sudden you're like, are you the one who wrote the book? Yeah. Like, I think I follow you on Instagram. And I'm like, okay, great. Like I have a reason to talk to this dude because he looks really interesting. And anyone who's holding a camera, like doing something like that, I'm just always intrigued. So yeah.
Well, big shout out to Jameson.
Yeah. Big shout out to our people.
You know, she's in the book and she keeps forever sharing your stuff. So that's how we found you.
She's so awesome. It's a mutual admiration society that just got larger. Yeah.
That's all I had.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time, Cortney, your presence. Listeners, see you in the next episode. Till then, stay curious.